Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Lecture time. Hey, everybody. Today we've got a lecture on the digestive tract. I recently got a question about digestive enzymes like you might get from papaya or pineapple and whether or not those really help. I can tell you this is a confusing topic when it comes to things like, gosh, when I buy prescription pancreatic enzymes, they're hundreds of dollars for a bottle. How can you possibly sell these supplemental ones and them work? Not to mention the differences in pH throughout your digestive tract, right? The acidity and all these other things. That's what this part one is about. It's about the basics of the digestive tract, the gastrointestinal tract, and maybe in the future we'll get to some of the individual portions. For now, let's go on in the classroom. Okay, let's start with some terms on this next slide. The first one is digestive system. So your digestive system is your gastrointestinal tract. That's our second bulleted point as well here. But digestive system includes the tract where food actually moves, right, from mouth to anus all the way through, but also accessory digestive organs. Digestive organs that often they play other roles as well, but they lie outside of the actual tract where food moves. And we'll talk about that mostly in part 2 of this presentation. So the way that they help digestion, or they allow digestion, digestion meaning the breakdown, right, of the foods you eat. For example, you break down the pasta you eat into much smaller molecules. You don't have blood pasta, for goodness sake. You have blood glucose, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But the point being is there's mechanical breakdown or digestion. There's chemical breakdown of food. And then there's also absorption and elimination of these foods that we can't forget. So our next term is simply gastrointestinal tract or GI tract. That's where the food moves through. So that's mouth, right? Then esophagus, into the stomach, then the small intestines, then the large intestines, then the rectum, and anus. Now, one thing that's important to remember about your GI tract is very much unlike your bloodstream. The GI tract is an open to the environment system, right? Your mouth is open to the world, and your backside is too. So that means bacteria is going to grow in there, at least in some parts of it, very much unlike your bloodstream, which is a very closed system. Okay, so the GI tract is open to the environment. If we look at our third bullet on this terms slide, motility. Motility is the movement of food. Food will move through your GI tract, not just because of gravity. And we'll take a look at that in just a moment. And then the fourth term on this slide is enzymes. Enzymes, this is a very important term. These allow chemical reactions like digestion, right, to take place, to occur easily. Enzymes, their names end in ASE. I'm fond of telling students you can really read your way through a good portion of things like anatomy, physiology, chemistry, if you get used to the prefixes and the suffixes, right, or even the root words. So if the suffix, if it ends in ASE, it's an enzyme. For example, we have some examples here, amylase. Amylase breaks down amylose. If it ends in OSE, it's a sugar or a carbohydrate. So amylase. Another example here is lipase. And you might guess that breaks down lipids, right? What's the enzyme that breaks down lipids, or an enzyme? A lipase. And then finally, protease. Those are enzymes that, you guessed it, break down protein. So there's 4 terms for you just to get us started so we could start marching through the purpose and the segments of the GI tract. Let's go to the next slide, simply entitled Digestive System. First off, the digestive system has 2 processes. One is digestion, and that's breakdown. And 2 is absorption. The absorption almost entirely happens in your small intestines. You have very minor absorption of rare food compounds like through the mouth or the gastric lining, something like alcohol. But almost all of it happens in your small intestines. So again, two processes of the digestive system. One, digestive. Two, absorptive. Okay. Our second bullet here gives you some details on that. So digestion breaks down, the first sub-bullet here is carbohydrates, so starches and sugars. Those get broken down into single sugar molecules. Those single sugar molecules are actually what get absorbed in your small intestines. Our second sub-bullet here is proteins. Proteins get broken down into their constituent parts, amino acids. Later in class we'll talk about this, but human proteins involve 20 specific amino acids. There are hundreds in nature, but 20 very important to human proteins. They're the building blocks of proteins. So you don't absorb whole proteins, for goodness sake. That would cause a massive anaphylactic reaction, and you would have, again, allergic reaction. You can't have, for example, whole beef or egg proteins in your bloodstream. You break them down through digestion into their component amino acids, and that's what you absorb. And then the final sub-bullet here is fats. The fats that we consume are broken down into their components, which are fatty acids and glycerol. When we get to the fat chapter, we'll talk about that in more detail. Fatty acids are really the business end of a fat molecule. The glycerol is sort of a backbone that holds it all together. But again, so if you eat something that's almost entirely fat, like butter, real butter, your digestive tract is going to disassemble those triglycerides, those fats, into their fatty acids and their little glycerol backbone. And that's what you're going to absorb, again, in your small intestines. Lastly on here, we just reiterate that keyword enzymes, because there's a few other things that we need to know about them. Enzymes, one, are themselves proteins. So I'm fond of saying to students, they're proteins, Y-O-U, right? They're not the beef protein. They're not the egg protein. They're not dietary proteins. They're human proteins in your digestive tract, in your cells, right? We rely on many thousands of different kinds of enzymes to let all of the biochemistry happen in our bodies. So they are themselves proteins. And second, they break chemical bonds, or they allow chemical bonds to break in a timely fashion, like breaking down those carbs and proteins and fats that we just discussed. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, though, so let's take a look at the next slide, and it shows how an enzyme might work. So this is a picture from your book, but an enzyme in the diagram here is sort of a green, strangely shaped blob. The truth is, it's a very complex three-dimensional sequence of amino acids. So the three-dimensional nature of proteins are very important, and we'll talk about that later in class. But here, it's shaped just in such a way that it fits with its target. So if you look in the upper left of this slide, you can see that we have sucrose. Table sugar is going to be the molecule that this enzyme is going to attack and want to break down in this case. Some enzymes actually build, but right now we're talking about digestion, so these are breakdown types of enzymes. So the enzyme that's going to attack the sucrose, or the table sugar, which is a double sugar that we'll discuss soon, the enzyme for sucrose would be sucrase. It's the enzyme ends in ASE. So you can see that it's built to specifically fit with its substrate, with its target. And as we move from left to right across this diagram, you can see the enzyme moves up. It fits very nicely with those molecules, those two single sugars that collectively form table sugar. With the help of a little bit of water, it then hydrolyzes that bond, and you end up with separate glucose and fructose. Those are the single sugar components of sucrose, the white granular stuff, right? Table sugar. So those are now broken down, and importantly, the enzyme then, having released its products, can do it again. It can go back and find another
molecule of sucrose. The enzyme isn't used up. It's not destroyed in this way. Now, they don't last forever. Again, enzymes are proteins. They're proteins. They don't last forever. All proteins are going to have a half-life. Eventually, they're going to degrade, but they don't get used up in the chemical reactions. And this diagram shows that pretty nicely.
Alrighty. Well, I hope that's not too dry, but the intent here is that if you understand a bodily system, then you can start to think about ways that you can manipulate or at least ask the right questions on how to manipulate it for better health and well-being and that sort of thing. Again, in the future, we may actually get into the nitty-gritty of each organ that's involved, just with the intent, again, of you being able to come back on some of these basic lectures that we typically do on Thursdays, not always moving forward, and you have some frame of reference. In fact, this came up a little bit in that lecture about the mathematics of weight loss and carbon balance and all that sort of thing, where the lecturer was trying to explain the digestive system, right? How we're not just a solid piece of plastic all the way through like an action figure, and that the things that we consume, they're not really part of us until their tiny molecular parts are absorbed through the intestinal lining and get in our blood and then deposited in our tissues and that kind of thing. Anyway, I hope that was enlightening for at least you nerds out there, and we'll see you next time. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.